world watched as Prince Harry, once the golden boy of the British royal family, now finds himself spiraling into an abyss of financial collapse and royal rejection. The House of Montecito that once promised freedom, stability, and a new life was slipping through his fingers, piece by piece. The wildest thing? The palace wasn't just turning its back on him, they were doing it with chilling precision. Riven Rock, Harry and Meghan's extravagant $14.65 million estate, was meant to be their kingdom and oasis in the sun-kissed hills of California. But it was built on a shaky foundation. A mere $5 million down payment and a crushing $9.5 million mortgage that they had no idea how to manage. And when their insurance lapsed in December 2025, it triggered their worst nightmare, foreclosure. The clock was ticking, and Harry had just 21 days to prove that coverage was back in place. But no one was coming to his rescue. Enter Tyler Perry, the man who had once been their financial savior. For years, Perry had bankrolled their personal security, transport, and housing to the tune of $3.6 million. But by January 2026, Perry had had enough. Harry's desperate plea for a short-term bridge loan was rejected. It was the final straw. Perry's once constant support vanished, leaving the Sussexes with no financial backing but a mountain of debt. And it wasn't just Perry. Their $100 million Netflix deal, which was supposed to be their ticket to fame and fortune, had turned into a nightmare. Only $25 million of that deal had been paid up front, and most of it was recoupable based on content delivery. Problem was, aside from a docuseries and a podcast pilot, nothing had been produced by the end of 2025. Netflix executives invoked the clawback clause, demanding $20 million back. And so, Harry's once promising future in Hollywood was crumbling, piece by piece. Meanwhile, the royal family had made it clear they were not going to bail him out. Prince William, as the future king, was now the man, with the power to decide Harry's fate. On January 25, 2026, William issued a decree that sent shockwaves through the monarchy. The Duchy of Cornwall, tied to the public, the crown, and the British taxpayers, would not be used to rescue Harry from his financial miss. There would be no loan, no restructuring, and no use of royal capital to cover his personal failures. It wasn't about brotherhood anymore, it was about governance. The monarchy could not, under any circumstances, be seen propping up a private American venture while Britain faced cost of living crisis. Behind the palace walls, Harry's frantic calls for help were met with cold, calculated indifference. He appealed to William's childhood loyalty, hoping for a sympathetic ear, but it was no use. William, backed by a team of advisors, had reviewed the financials and deemed Harry's situation untenable. The future king made it clear there would be no royal handout, but the saga was far from over. As Harry's financial ship sank, Meghan continued to live in a bubble of luxury. On January 18, she posted glamorous pictures from an exclusive Beverly Hills shopping district, sipping iced matcha at a rooftop bar, while just days later, court filings and foreclosure notices were piling up. Harry, meanwhile, was seen driving his black Range Rover alone, parked in public parking lots to sleep. The contrast between their social media glamour and their financial collapse did not go unnoticed, especially within palace circles. In private, William had made his decision. The optics were damning. While Harry struggled to pay bills, Meghan flaunted their supposed success. It painted them as irresponsible, more concerned with social media profiles and PR deals than securing their children's future. The monarchy, once criticized for being out of touch, now stood as the pillar of stability. The tension between the brothers had reached a breaking point, and the palace had made one thing clear: Harry had crossed a line. By January 22nd, 2026, Harry's nightmare was unfolding. His once proud Montecito estate was now under siege. Appraisers cataloged the luxury furnishings, expensive furniture, and tech gear items once considered treasures, but now simply assets to be seized. The house that was supposed to be his refuge was being taken by the bank, just days before foreclosure was set to become public record. This was no longer the Hollywood escape the world had imagined. The glittering lifestyle was gone, replaced by a cold reality. A few hours later, Harry, devoid of his former royal privileges, was spotted driving out of the gates of Riven Rock, escorted only by a lone private contractor. He had no security, no home, and no clear plan. Meanwhile, Meghan continued her public image campaign. She was seen at exclusive spa resorts, shopping districts, and yacht parties. Her curated social media posts screamed luxury, but behind the filters was a different story. Harry, alone in his black Range Rover, avoided long-term rentals due to his inability to prove steady income. It was a far cry from the prince he once was. As Harry navigated the streets of Santa Barbara trying to find a place to sleep, his brother, William, was busy making his own moves. Behind closed doors, William was preparing to take drastic action. The next 30 days would decide not only Harry's future, but the future of the royal family itself. The stakes were higher than ever. But it wasn't just about the money anymore, it was about the children. Prince William, who had once been Harry's closest confidant, now saw things through the lens of royal duty. Reports surfaced that the Sussex children, Archie and Lilibet, were living in hotels, moving from place to place without stability. Their lives had become a circus, their future uncertain. William, furious, couldn't ignore the impact this was having on the royal image. His response was clear: the crown would not let the children live without stability. Within 24 hours, William's decree was made public. The British media, for the first time, was not focused on the Sussex's media deals or interviews. The criticism was sharper. It was about parenting. It was about responsibility. It was about whether Harry and Meghan were fit to be parents to the future heirs of the British throne. In a surprising turn, even King Charles issued his own ultimatum. The message was simple but brutal. Harry had 30 days to divorce Meghan Markle, or he would be permanently cut off from the royal family. The warning was harsh but necessary. Charles knew that if Harry remained attached to Meghan, the royal reputation would continue to spiral. The family could no longer afford the scandal. Harry's response? Outrage. He invoked his late mother, Princess Diana, telling royal aides he would rather be homeless with Meghan than return to royal life as a managed prince. It was a heart-wrenching moment for Charles, but William was unmoved. He saw his brother's actions as a failure to acknowledge the larger picture, the crown's survival. The situation was now out of control, and all eyes were on Harry's next move. But there was a looming fear within the palace. William knew Harry, and he knew his brother was capable of burning it all down. A tell-all book, an explosive memoir, a documentary, anything that could bring the monarchy to its knees. The Sussex brand, once untouchable, was crumbling faster than anyone could have predicted, and with it, Harry's future. The clock was ticking, and the consequences would be felt for decades to come. Would Harry choose the path of exile, or would he return to the fold, forever changed by the fires of family betrayal? Let me know when you're ready for part 2. As the 30-day clock ticked down, the palace had no choice but to brace for impact. The royal advisors worked behind the scenes to prepare for any eventuality, be it a public meltdown, a tell-all book, or some other calculated destruction from Harry. But as the days passed, it became clear that Harry, once a carefree prince with a future paved in royal gold, was now a man backed into a corner, desperate and unpredictable. The most chilling thing? The media frenzy had already begun. Reports emerged that Meghan, despite being embroiled in financial disaster, was still keeping up appearances, publishing glossy, idealized photos from high-end cafes and yachts, while the financial burden of Ribbon Rock loomed over their heads. The hypocrisy didn't escape the public. Social media users began mocking her carefree posts, asking where the children were sleeping that night. The unspoken questions were eating away at her credibility. To the royal establishment, it wasn't just about the debts and the property seizures anymore. It wasn't about Harry's reckless spending or Meghan's extravagant lifestyle. It was about the children. Archie and Lilibet, once viewed as the crown's innocent future, were now casualties of a royal experiment gone wrong. They were being raised in limbo without a permanent home or stable schooling. The optics of this failure had reached a tipping point. There was no room for negotiation anymore. Behind closed doors, William's position had hardened. He tolerated Harry's betrayal for years: Oprah interviews, Netflix specials, public spats. But when the welfare of the children was at stake, the gloves came off. In the eyes of the crown, Harry's failure as a father was the breaking point. William's decree was no longer just about money, it was about the preservation of the royal legacy, the monarchy's very future. No child of Windsor descent could live this way. And if Harry wouldn't provide a stable home for his children, then the crown would intervene. But even with William's strong stance, the palace was divided. Queen Camilla, ever the voice of reason, voiced her concern over the growing rift between the brothers. She worried that the monarchy's refusal to offer Harry any mercy could drive him to desperation that might come with a very public blowback. But William, resolute as ever, refused to soften his stance. There was no room for sentiment in this decision, only the cold, hard truth of monarchy and duty. By mid-February, the drama had reached its boiling point. Harry, refusing to bend, had decided to fight back. He knew the power of his story, the story of the prince who had been cast aside, betrayed by the very institution that had once been his family. And so the whispers began. A memoir, a bombshell tell-all, a documentary, a full-scale royal assault on the monarchy itself. Harry knew every crack in the system. He knew where the bodies were buried, and he knew just how to bring it all to light. Sources close to Meghan revealed that she had already begun reactivating intellectual property filings. A new miniseries, one that would turn the royal family's treatment of her into a narrative of betrayal and injustice, was in the works. The whispers in Hollywood were growing louder. Agents, producers, and networks were sniffing around, intrigued by the potential of the Sussex brand once again, though this time with a far darker twist. The old, glossy images of happy family life were being replaced with a story of injustice, revenge, and family betrayal. The tension within the royal family was palpable. William, determined to keep the crown's image intact, had his advisors work tirelessly to plan for every eventuality. But as the days went by, the pressure only mounted. The public was starting to take sides. Some supported Harry and Meghan, seeing them as victims of an outdated institution. Others sided with William, demanding that the monarchy stand strong and not bend to the whims of a man who had turned his back on everything he was born to protect. And so the stage was set for a showdown of historic proportions. Would Harry and Meghan succeed in tearing the royal family apart, using their story as a weapon? Or would the monarchy, led by William, stand firm and weather the storm? The clock was ticking, and each passing day brought new revelations, new risks, and a growing sense of impending collapse. But one thing was certain: the world was watching. Harry, once a prince with everything to lose, was now a man with nothing left to lose. And the monarchy was prepared to go to any length to prevent him from taking them down with him. As for Meghan, her struggle had only just begun. Despite the mounting financial strain and public ridicule, she continued to fight. The facade of wealth and power, so carefully constructed over the years, was beginning to crack. But would it be enough to save her family from the inevitable unraveling? Harry had made his choice. He wasn't going to back down. If anything, the rejection he'd felt from his family had only fueled his anger and resolve. He could see it clearly now. The monarchy wasn't just an institution. It was a machine. Indifferent to the personal struggles of its members, a machine that would crush anyone who dared to step outside its rigid expectations. And Harry had stepped outside. He had rebelled. And now he was fighting for his survival. The memoir was still in the works. It was a project that Meghan had been quietly championing, and despite the mounting risks, she was determined to push forward. Every page, every chapter was a direct shot at the monarchy, a direct challenge to everything it stood for. The memoir was more than just a recounting of their lives. It was a weapon, a way to take down the institution that had once been Harry's family, and in his eyes, it was a family that had abandoned him when he needed them most. As the days passed, whispers in royal circles began to spread. There were rumblings that the palace had already begun preparing its own response, a media offensive that would paint Harry and Meghan as disgruntled royals, with a reckless disregard for the responsibilities they had been born into. A public relations war was brewing, and the stakes couldn't have been higher. The monarchy's very survival, its credibility, was on the line. And then there was the looming threat of Meghan. Despite her financial troubles, Meghan's media influence remained strong. She had built an empire around herself, a brand that was inseparable from the idea of royal rebellion. She knew how to manipulate the media, how to play the game, and if she decided to go public with her own version of events, it could change everything. The Sussexes, once seen as outcasts, could turn the narrative in their favor. The question was whether they would play the long game or